Topic two today, I'd like to have a conversation about what being generational means because we've been yelling about this in the Discord for about a day in the episode discussion thread. And I have had the takeaway that nobody seems to agree what the word generational means. And maybe being a generational prospect is a lot different than being a generational player. You've been silent, as you usually are on Discord happenings. That would be because you're in California lying about not being in California. So probably a little too busy to check what's going on there. But to summarize it for you, the Cooper Flagg discussion turned into a question of, well, there's always a generational prospect. He's like the seventh generational guy in the last 7 years. And I want to discuss that. Is he actually, like, going through the last 20 years, what players have come through high school do you think should have been dubbed generational prospects based on what they were at the time?
See, that's the thing, and I don't even know because I obviously you just pointed out that I did not participate in the discourse in the Discord. But like when you talk about generational prospects, you got to look at like what they looked like in high school coming up, basically, and maybe early on in college before they got to the NBA and proved it. Like Ant Edwards is considered one of the best players in the NBA, one of the best young players in the NBA. I don't think anyone was calling Anthony Edwards generational at his time, right? Like in high school. I don't think anyone was even calling like Jason Tatum generational at his time. Now guys that were generational, probably like a Zion, that was kind of a generational thing, a one-on-one thing. I personally was of the upbringing that Cade Cunningham was actually generational. Like I think that with his winning, what he did with that Montverde team, I think he was considered at his size to be generational. I think Coop deserves this tag. I do. Because I think that if you go back and you look in the last like 10 years of like what the generational prospects would be, I think Cooper would fit in that mold and you would take Coop over a lot of those guys at the same time.
Okay, I appreciate the insight from you, but that also feels like a big dodge question.
Well, how so?
I want to know who the generational prospects have been. I hear you and understand and think I agree with how you're approaching the Coop discussion, but like I get the thing that's interesting to me here is like
There's three. I get what you're saying. There's three that come to my mind right away, and I'm a forgetful guy, but the three that came to my mind right away were Zion, Cade, Wiggins.
Cade. See, okay. All right. It's interesting. There's just a lot of people who disagree on this. That's the interesting part to me. Cade was a great prospect. I don't think there was anything about Cade coming up that felt like something we haven't seen before. And to me, that maybe that's my definition of it.
I was just gonna say, so is it something you've never seen before, which makes someone generational?
Or at minimum, it's got to be like an archetype of a player that you see like once every 30 years, right? Like,
Hmm.
and I also think part of the generational discussion that frustrates me is I think people throw out what they were as prospects for what they become as NBA players. Because I know this from the discussion. Like Akil, shout out to Akil who's in our Discord. He's adamant Kevin Durant was a generational prospect. Kevin Durant was considered the second best player in his class. Greg Oden was the generational prospect. And I'm not saying there can't be two generational guys in the same class, but nobody thought Kevin Durant was that one of one to even consider taking him first. Like it was not considered even a debate should he go over Greg Oden. And he was great in college, but like we are doing the revisionist history thing where we now see what Kevin Durant's been in the NBA, and clearly there's nobody that's ever been like him. But
Was Chet generational?
I think Chet's close. He's right on the cut line for me. There to me, there's a pool of guys I would say are unquestionably generational. I can run through those names, and then there's a pool of like close. The pool for me that is unquestionably generational in the last 20-25 years. I think Cooper Flagg is on it. He's not the highest name, but he's the most recent. I'm working backwards. You don't see a 6'9" point guard that like I just haven't seen it. I don't know what that is. The only name that it reminds me of is Ben Simmons, who is also on my generational list for what it is.
Ooh,
Like
okay.
Ben Simmons coming up as a prospect was 6'10" point guard. We don't see that. Like, and he got to the league and he had a big time injury before he even played. And then he was awesome for like 3 years. He was on track to be a generational NBA player. And then it all fell apart in a very one of one unique way. But the prospect was there. His year at LSU was one of the best one and done years we've ever seen. Um, I think Wemby is clearly generational. And yeah, I know like we're doing a big flurry right now, but Flagg, Wemby, Ben Simmons, all generational. I think Zion was a generational player. I think by the time Zion got to college, we were saying we've never seen anything like this. He is obviously the number one pick. And it didn't work out yet. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. He's had injury stuff, he's had weight stuff. It's concerning. But as a prospect, we've never seen anything like him. Then I think you got to go back further beyond those four. There weren't a ton in the late 2010s that I can think of. I think like Anthony Davis is a consideration.
Mm.
But Anthony Davis, I don't think was generational as a high school player. I think he was generational once we saw what he was at Kentucky.
Yeah. Oh, I would say towards the end of high school, he became generational.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, he
I
was the
guess.
consensus number one guy in the class, but like
Yeah.
part of this is a prerequisite. I think there's got to be no debate you're the number one player. And that's to me that disqualifies some guys. Like let's look at Chet and Paolo. Very unique prospects. If there's a debate on who's better, how are we saying you're generational? You're not even annual. Like
Okay.
I don't know.
That's a bar.
I don't know.
It was Anthony Bennett ever in this
No.
because when
No.
you say like this one-on-one thing, like one-on-one prospects,
No.
like how do you dissolve like just the freaks of nature, like the Edie's?
Anthony Edwards was a great prospect. He wasn't generational because we've seen other explosive guards that can shoot that are 6'5" shooting guards.
Was
Like,
Lonzo generational?
I don't think Lonzo was good enough. I think Lonzo as an archetype could have been, but I think like even watching him in college, he was good. He was never like a no-brainer. Like people were thought Markelle Fultz was better than him. Like it was a good class. That's all that was. I think Cade falls into like he's good. He's a good guard category. He's not generational. I think I'm trying to go through some other Michael Beasley, Derrick Rose. People have said, "Oh, Michael Beasley was generational. He went second in a draft behind Derrick Rose."
Derrick Rose might have been generational at the time.
Maybe, maybe, and then
Yeah,
injuries got the best of him. But he
we
was an
had
MVP very young.
we hadn't seen something like that in a long time. Like that, he was kind of the initial, I guess, like
Yeah,
just this athletic 6'3" point guard kind of thing.
yeah. I think Odin was definitely generational. I would say Kevin Durant wasn't because Odin was the guy in that class, and then he got hurt. So,
I hate that so much though, because Durant was just ah.
well, but that's where there's a difference between being a generational prospect and a generational player. Like we can draw the line on that, right? Like, are we? Because if we're saying Kevin Durant's generational, was Carmelo a generational prospect? The guy that went third, like
Was
he was
LeBron
great.
generational?
He was great. You
Was
can be
LeBron
great.
generational?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, just make sure. I wanted to hear it.
Yeah. So like my list since LeBron, I think would be LeBron, Greg Oden, Derrick Rose, Anthony Davis, Ben Simmons, Zion, Wemby, Flagg. That's my official list of 8 generational prospects. Now, you can look back and say a lot of those didn't pan out. Most of those that didn't pan out were due to injury, in my opinion. But like coming up as a can't miss prospect, I think that's the list. And I don't know that there's many you can even argue should be on there outside of that make much sense to me as a prospect.
One, I think I agree. Two, what would the score be between that team and the USA Select team?
Like, am I getting them at their peak high school?
Yeah.
124-76.
Okay, I just wanted to check.
Yeah, I love that team. It's a really good team.
All right.